The carriage door slammed open, and Eveline Laurent stepped into hell disguised as an English manor. She'd been promised a position, a future. Instead, she got chaos, screaming children tearing through marble halls, servants whispering behind hands, and a housekeeper who looked at her like she was already dead. "You're the 7th this month," the woman said flatly. "The Duke won't even see you." Eveline's trunk hit the ground. Her last coin had paid for this journey. No references. No home to return to. And somewhere in Paris, Armand Vale was probably laughing. She should have run. She didn't. If you want to see how a woman with nothing defeats a man who has everything, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city and let me know if you'd fight back or walk away. The English countryside had looked almost pretty from the train window. Rolling hills, stone walls cutting through farmland like scars, sheep dotting the landscape in clusters of dirty wool. Eveline had pressed her gloved hand against the cold glass and tried to imagine herself belonging to a place like this. Somewhere clean. Somewhere far from the filthy Parisian boarding house where she'd spent the last 3 months sleeping on a floor with 2 seamstresses and a woman who coughed blood into her sleeve every morning. The fantasy died the second Blackthorn Hall came into view. The estate sprawled across the hilltop like something designed to intimidate, all dark stone and narrow windows and towers that looked like they were built to watch for invading armies. The sky had gone the color of old bruises, and the wind smelled like rain and wet dirt and something else. Something sour. Eveline's stomach clenched. She told herself it was nerves. She'd been nervous before. She could handle nerves. What she wasn't prepared for was the absolute chaos waiting inside those walls. The carriage rattled to a stop in front of massive oak doors that looked like they hadn't been maintained in decades. Paint peeling, iron hinges crusted with rust. Eveline gathered her skirts, her only decent dress, dark blue wool she'd mended so many times. The original fabric was more memory than material, and stepped down onto gravel that crunched under her boots. The driver didn't offer his hand, didn't even look at her, just dropped her trunk onto the ground hard enough to make her wince and climb back up without a word. "Wait!" Eveline started, but he was already turning the horses. She stood there alone in the empty courtyard, wind whipping her hair loose from its careful pins, and stared at those enormous doors. No one came out. No butler in proper livery, no footman rushing to help with her things. Nothing but wind and the distant cry of crows and the creeping certainty that she'd made a terrible mistake. But going back wasn't an option. She picked up her trunk. God, it was heavy even with almost nothing inside, and hauled it up the stone steps one at a time. Her arms burned, her back protested. She didn't care. She'd barely raised her hand to knock when one of the doors swung inward so fast it nearly hit her in the face. A woman stood there. 50-something, maybe older, hard to tell with that face. Iron gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, black dress buttoned to her throat, eyes like chips of flint sweeping over Eveline the way you'd evaluate a horse at market. Quick, dismissive, already finding her lacking. "Miss Laurent, I presume." Not a question. A statement. Eveline straightened her spine, felt something in her lower back pop. "Yes, I'm here to see the Duke of—" "The Duke is not in residence." The woman's voice could have frozen water. "I am Mrs. Helmsley. Housekeeper, you are expected to wait." Eveline blinked. "Wait? The letter said many things, I'm sure." Mrs. Helmsley stepped back. Not quite an invitation, but not a slammed door either. "Inside. You're letting in the cold." Eveline dragged her trunk over the threshold. The entrance hall was enormous, vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadow, dark wood paneling that swallowed what little light came through the windows, a chandelier overhead that looked like it hadn't been lit since the previous century. And it was freezing. Colder inside than out, somehow, like the building itself was rejecting warmth. And it was loud. Somewhere upstairs a child was screaming. Not crying, screaming, the kind of sound that scraped against every nerve you had. Glass shattered. Something heavy hit the floor hard enough to shake the chandelier. Footsteps thundered overhead like a stampede. Mrs. Helmsley didn't even flinch. "The children," she said, like that explained everything. "The Duke's children?" Eveline asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "His wards. His late brother's offspring." Mrs. Helmsley's mouth twisted like she'd bitten into something rotten. "3 of them, 12, 9, and 7. They've been challenging since their parents died. Another crash from upstairs. Evelyn jumped. Mrs. Helmsley's expression didn't change. Challenging, Evelyn repeated. They've driven off 6 governesses in 4 months. Mrs. Helmsley finally met her eyes, and there was something almost satisfied in her gaze. Something cruel. You're the 7th. The words hit like cold water. 7. She was the 7th governess. I wasn't told there would be... You weren't told many things, I expect. Mrs. Helmsley turned and started walking down a dim corridor, heels clicking on marble, clearly expecting Evelyn to follow. The agency sends them in batches now, more efficient. You'll be given a room, same as the others were. If you last more than a week, we'll discuss wages and terms. If not, she shrugged one sharp shoulder. Well, there's always the next one. Candidate. That's what the housekeeper had almost said. Not employee, not governess. Candidate. Like this was an audition, like Evelyn was interchangeable with all the women who'd already failed and fled. Her hands clenched around the trunk handle so hard her knuckles went white. She wanted to scream. Wanted to walk straight back out that door and keep walking until she hit the ocean. But she'd spent her last franc on the train ticket from Dover. She had 14 shillings and 3 pence in her reticule and a stolen silk handkerchief that had belonged to a man she'd loved once, before he taught her exactly what love was worth when you had nothing to offer in return. She had nothing, which meant she had nothing left to lose. Where are the children now? Evelyn asked. Mrs. Helmsley stopped walking, turned slowly. For the first time, something like surprise flickered across that stone face. Upstairs, in the nursery wing, or what remains of it. Take me to them. Miss Laurent, you said I'm a candidate. Evelyn set down her trunk and pulled off her gloves one finger at a time very deliberately. So let me prove myself. Take me to the children. Mrs. Helmsley's eyes narrowed to slits. The last governess left in tears after 17 minutes. Then I'll last 18. They stared at each other. The house creaked around them. Something else shattered upstairs, followed by a peal of wild laughter that didn't sound like it came from a child at all. Then Mrs. Helmsley's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. 3rd floor, east wing. Follow the sounds of destruction. She turned on her heel. I'll have your room prepared, if you survive long enough to need it. She walked away, heels echoing, and left Evelyn standing alone in the cold, dark corridor with her battered trunk and her last shreds of dignity. Fine. Evelyn rolled her shoulders back, left the trunk where it sat, and headed for the stairs. The 3rd floor was worse than anything she could have imagined. The walls were destroyed. Not just scuffed or marked, actually destroyed. Deep gouges in the plaster like someone had taken a knife to them. Or maybe their fingernails. Paintings hung at violent angles or didn't hang at all, frames cracked and canvases torn. A vase lay in pieces near one doorway. Dead flowers scattered in a puddle of water gone green with algae. The carpet was stained with things Evelyn didn't want to identify. And the noise, the screaming, the crashing, the sound of wood splintering was coming from behind a door at the end of the hall. The door was white, or had been once. Now it was covered in muddy handprints and what looked suspiciously like food stains. Evelyn's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She'd worked with children before, briefly, in Paris, for a banker's family before everything fell apart. But those had been well-fed, well-dressed children who knew which fork to use at dinner and how to curtsy for guests. This was something else entirely. She reached for the door handle, hesitated. Then she heard it. A voice, small and broken and furious. I hate you. I hate all of you. I want Mama. The sound of something breaking, then sobbing. Evelyn pushed the door open. The nursery looked like a battlefield, books ripped apart, pages scattered like snow across the floor, a rocking horse on its side, one leg snapped clean off, curtains torn down, rods hanging at drunken angles, paint smeared on the walls in shapes that might have been deliberate or might have been pure destruction, toys everywhere, broken, bent, trampled, and in the center of it all, 3 children. A girl stood on top of a heavy wooden desk, maybe 12 years old, all sharp angles and wild dark hair and braids that had come half undone. She was holding a wooden sword. Where in God's name had she gotten a sword? and pointing it at the door like Evelyn was an enemy soldier. A boy sat in the corner, maybe 9, knees pulled up to his chest and hands pressed over his ears. Dark hair like his sister's, but eyes a completely different color, pale gray instead of brown. He was rocking slightly, making a low humming sound that was almost musical, and the youngest, a little girl who couldn't be more than 7, stood in front of an overturned table holding a porcelain doll by its hair. The doll's dress was torn. Its face was cracked, and the little girl was grinning like she'd just won the greatest victory of her short life. All 3 of them froze when they saw Evelyn. The silence was sudden and absolute. Even the boy stopped humming. "Who are you?" the oldest girl demanded. Her voice was hoarse, raw from screaming. "You're not the Duchess. Where's the Duchess?" "There is no Duchess," Evelyn said. She kept her voice calm, steady. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her with a soft click. "My name is Evelyn Laurent, and you are?" "None of your business." The girl lifted the sword higher. Her hands were shaking. "Get out. Leave. We don't want you here. We don't want anyone here." "No." The sword wavered. The girl's eyes went wide. "I said leave," she snapped. "Tell Mrs. Helmsley we'll throw things at you. We will. We've done it before. Leave before we—" "Before you what?" Evelyn looked around the destroyed room. "Break something else? You've already broken most of it. Scream louder? I could hear you from the ground floor. I think you've hit your maximum volume." The youngest girl giggled. The oldest shot her a look that could have melted iron. "I'm serious," she said, but her voice cracked. "Get out before you cry?" Evelyn asked quietly. The girl's face went red. "I'm not crying." "I didn't say you were." Evelyn crossed her arms. "But you want to, don't you?" Silence. The boy in the corner finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, swollen. He'd been crying for a while. "We're not having tantrums," he said. His voice was so soft Evelyn almost missed it. We're angry." "I can see that." Evelyn walked over slowly and crouched down so she was closer to his level. Not touching, just near. "What are you angry about?" "Everything." The oldest girl jumped down from the desk, sword still raised, still shaking. "Our parents are dead. Uncle Rowan doesn't want us. Nobody wants us. The servants hate us. And they keep sending people like you, people who pretend to care when they don't. And then they leave and we're alone again, and I'm tired of it." Her voice broke on the last word. The sword clattered to the floor. She stood there breathing hard, fists clenched, tears streaming down her face that she was furiously trying to wipe away. Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest. "You're right," she said softly. "I don't know you. I don't know what you've lost or what you've been through. But I do know what it's like when everyone decides you're not worth the trouble. And I know what it's like to want to burn everything down just so someone will look at you." The girl stared at her. "You don't know anything about us." "No," Evelyn agreed. "I don't, so tell me. Start with your names at least, because if we're going to be stuck together, I'd like to know who I'm dealing with." More silence. Then the boy spoke again. "I'm Thomas," he said. He pointed at the oldest girl. "That's Beatrice. And that's Clara." The youngest, still clutching her broken doll. "Thomas? Beatrice? Clara?" Evelyn looked at each of them in turn. "When was the last time any of you ate?" No answer. "I'll take that as not recently." Evelyn stood up. "Wait here." "You can't just—" Beatrice started. "Watch me." Evelyn walked out, leaving all 3 of them staring after her, and headed back downstairs. Mrs. Helmsley was in the kitchen, arguing with the cook, a large red-faced woman who looked like she wrestled pigs for entertainment. "I don't care what you think proper," the cook was saying, waving a wooden spoon like a weapon. "I'm not sending food upstairs just so those little devils can throw it at the walls again." "They're hungry," Evelyn interrupted. Both women turned. Mrs. Helmsley's expression went arctic. "Miss Laurent, you were instructed to wait in— Those children upstairs haven't eaten." Evelyn planted both hands on the long wooden table that dominated the center of the kitchen. "When was the last time someone fed them?" "They refuse to come down for meals," Mrs. Helmsley said coldly. "We've tried." "Then bring the meals to them." "We did try that." The cook bristled. "They threw a plate at Mary's head last week, nearly split her skull open. We're not risking—" "So you just stopped trying." Evelyn stared at them. They're children, grieving, angry, starving children, and you're punishing them for being inconvenient? How dare you? Mrs. Helmsley started. Make me a tray. Evelyn's voice was steady, even though her hands were shaking. Bread, cheese, fruit, whatever you have that won't spoil. I'll take it up myself. You will do no such— Fine. Evelyn reached across the table and grabbed a loaf of bread sitting near the edge. I'll take this then. Mrs. Helmsley moved to block her. Miss Laurent, you are severely overstepping and you're failing them. Evelyn met her gaze and didn't blink. I don't know what the Duke pays you to do, but I'm fairly certain letting children starve in their own home isn't part of it. Now move. For one terrible moment, Evelyn thought the housekeeper might actually strike her. Her hand twitched. Her jaw went tight. Then she stepped aside. You have until tomorrow morning, Mrs. Helmsley said quietly. Dangerously. If you're still here by dawn, we'll discuss your position. If not, she smiled without warmth, there's always candidate number 8. Evelyn grabbed the bread, a wedge of hard yellow cheese, 3 apples from a bowl near the window, and a clay jug of what smelled like watered-down cider. She didn't have a tray, so she bundled everything into her shawl and headed back upstairs, ignoring the cook's muttered curses and Mrs. Helmsley's cold stare following her all the way out. The children were exactly where she'd left them. Beatrice was sitting on the overturned table now, sword across her lap, watching the door like she expected soldiers. Thomas was still in his corner, still rocking slightly. Clara had moved to the window, pressing her small hands and face against the glass, breath fogging the pane. Evelyn set her makeshift bundle on the floor and unwrapped it carefully. Eat, she said. Nobody moved. It's not poisoned, Evelyn added. She tore off a piece of bread and ate it herself, chewing deliberately. See? Still alive. Clara moved first. She crept forward on silent feet, grabbed an apple, and darted back to the window like a fox stealing from a henhouse. She bit into it immediately, juice running down her chin. Thomas came next, slower, more hesitant. He took the cheese, whispered, "Thank you," so quietly Evelyn almost didn't hear it, and retreated to his corner to eat in small, careful bites. Beatrice stayed on the table. You think this changes anything? She asked. No, Evelyn said honestly, but you're less likely to throw things at me if you're not starving, and I'd rather not get hit with a plate on my first day. Despite herself, despite everything, Beatrice's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Not quite, but close. She climbed down from the table, picked up the bread, tore off a piece, chewed slowly, swallowed. Her eyes never left Evelyn's face. You're different, she said finally. From the others. How so? You didn't cry when you saw the mess. You didn't run screaming. You didn't try to bribe us with sweets and lies about how everything's going to be wonderful now. Beatrice tilted her head. Why are you here? Evelyn sat down on the floor, back against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Because I have nowhere else to go, she said. The truth, simple and brutal. Same as you, I expect. That seemed to surprise all 3 of them. Even Clara stopped eating to stare. Our uncle doesn't want us, Thomas said quietly from his corner. He never did. He only took us in because the law said he had to, because there was nobody else. Maybe, Evelyn said. Or maybe he doesn't know what to do with you. People get stupid when they're grieving. They make bad decisions. They run away from things that scare them. You talk weird, Clara announced through a mouthful of apple. Your words are all funny. I'm French. Oh, Clara thought about this. I don't like French people. Cook says they eat snails. We do, Evelyn said. With lots of butter and garlic. They're delicious. Clara made a disgusted face. Beatrice almost smiled again. Are you going to leave? She asked. Like all the others? Evelyn considered the question. Really considered it. She could leave. Should probably leave. This place was a nightmare. The house was falling apart. The children were half feral. The staff was actively hostile. And the Duke, whoever he was, wherever he was, clearly didn't give a damn about any of it. She could go back to Paris. Back to… what? The boarding house? Armand's cruel smile when he saw her again? The pitying looks from women who'd warned her not to trust a man with pretty words and empty promises? No. God, no. I'm staying, she said. For now, at least. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. Why? You said yourself you don't know us. Because someone has to stay. Eveline met her challenging stare. And everyone else already left, so it might as well be me. The room went quiet. Not the terrible, violent quiet from before. Something softer. Something that felt almost like peace, fragile and temporary as spring ice. Clara finished her apple, tossed the core vaguely in the direction of a bin that was already overflowing, and climbed into Eveline's lap without asking permission. She was sticky. She smelled like unwashed child and apple juice. Her hair was tangled. She was perfect. I like you, Clara announced. You're not mean like Mrs. Helmsley, and you don't smell like old flowers like the last one. I like you too, Eveline said, and meant it. Thomas smiled from his corner, small and tentative and real. And Beatrice? Beatrice finally lowered the sword completely, set it aside, and sat down cross-legged on the floor. Uncle Rowan is going to hate you, she said matter-of-factly. Probably. He hates everyone, especially women. Especially women who ask questions or want to change things. Then we should get along perfectly. This time Beatrice actually laughed, short and sharp and surprised, like she'd forgotten she knew how. Eveline stayed with them until the light outside faded to purple and then black, until Clara fell asleep against her shoulder, heavy and warm and trusting in a way that made Eveline's chest hurt. She carried the little girl down the hall to a bedroom, surprisingly clean, surprisingly untouched by the chaos, with a narrow bed and faded curtains, and tucked her in. Clara didn't wake up, just curled onto her side and kept sleeping. Thomas went to his own room without being asked, pausing only to whisper good night before disappearing inside. Beatrice lingered in the doorway of her room, one hand on the frame. You're really staying? She asked. Even when he comes back? Yes. Even if he tries to send you away? Even then? Beatrice studied her face for a long moment, looking for lies, probably, looking for cracks in the armor. Then she nodded once, sharp and decisive, and closed her door with a soft click. Eveline stood alone in the dark hallway, covered in crumbs and apple juice and the sticky residue of Clara's hands, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, foolish hope. She went downstairs to find her trunk. Mrs. Helmsley had left it outside a small room on the second floor, barely bigger than a closet, with a narrow bed and a single window overlooking gardens that looked dead even in the darkness. But it was warm. The bed had clean sheets, and it was hers. Eveline unpacked her few belongings: 3 dresses, 2 nightgowns, a hairbrush with half the bristles missing, the stolen handkerchief, a small portrait of her mother, the paint flaking at the edges. That was it. That was everything she owned in the world. She changed into her nightgown, washed her face in the basin on the dresser, and crawled into bed. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out what came next. Tomorrow she'd probably have to face the infamous Duke Rowan Blackthorne, the man who'd abandoned 3 children to chaos and didn't care enough to even be here when new governesses arrived. Tomorrow she'd probably fail, probably get sent away like all the others. But tonight she'd survived. Tonight she'd fed 3 starving children and made one of them almost smile and held another while she slept. Tonight was enough. Eveline closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under, and for the first time in months, she didn't dream about Armand's face or her mother's disappointment or the cold Paris streets. She dreamed about 3 children with dark hair and damaged hearts, and a house that might become something other than a prison. If she could just hold on long enough. If she could just be brave enough to stay. Eveline woke to the sound of breaking glass. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was back in Paris, back in the boarding house where fights broke out every other night and someone was always throwing something at someone else. Then she remembered. England. Blackthorne Hall. 3 children who'd been abandoned by everyone who was supposed to care about them. She was out of bed before she'd fully opened her eyes, grabbing her shawl and rushing into the hallway in her bare feet and nightgown. The crash had come from upstairs. The nursery wing again. Dawnlight was just starting to filter through the windows, gray and weak. The house was freezing. Eveline's breath misted in front of her face as she took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the way the old wood groaned under her weight. The nursery door was open. Inside, Beatrice stood in the middle of the floor, surrounded by shattered glass, her face white, her hands shaking. "It was an accident," she said immediately. Not defensive, not angry, scared. "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to open the window and the whole pain just—" "Are you hurt?" Eveline asked, stepping carefully around the glass. "No, Beatrice looked down at her hands. There was blood on her palm, a thin red line across the base of her thumb. "Oh. Come here." Eveline took her by the wrist, gently, carefully, and led her away from the broken window. "Sit." Beatrice sat on the edge of the overturned table without argument. That was how Eveline knew she was actually shaken. The girl who'd pointed a wooden sword at her yesterday wouldn't have obeyed so easily. Eveline examined the cut. Not deep, barely bleeding anymore, but it needed to be cleaned. "Wait here," she said. "Don't move." She went downstairs, found the kitchen already bustling. The cook was there, and two maids Eveline hadn't seen before, and Mrs. Helmsley standing by the stove with a cup of tea and that same cold expression. They all stopped talking when Eveline walked in. "I need clean water," Eveline said, "and bandages." Beatrice cut her hand. "The children are not your responsibility until—" Mrs. Helmsley started. "She's bleeding." Eveline didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. "Clean water, bandages. Now." One of the maids, young, maybe 16, with frightened eyes, scurried to get what she'd asked for. Mrs. Helmsley's mouth pressed into a thin line, but she didn't say anything else. Eveline took the supplies and went back upstairs. Beatrice hadn't moved. She was staring at her hand like she couldn't quite believe it was bleeding, like the pain was somehow surprising. "This is going to sting," Eveline warned, and cleaned the cut with water that was cold enough to make Beatrice hiss. She wrapped the hand carefully, tying the bandage snug but not tight. "There, good as new." "You didn't ask what happened," Beatrice said quietly. "You told me. It was an accident." "Mrs. Helmsley won't believe that. She'll say I did it on purpose. She'll say I'm destructive and wild and—" Her voice cracked. "She'll send you away, like the others, because of us. Because we're too much trouble." Eveline sat down next to her on the table. "Let me tell you something about Mrs. Helmsley. She doesn't get to decide whether I stay or go. I do. She's the housekeeper. She has all the power here." "No." Eveline shook her head. "She has authority. That's different from power. Real power is deciding what you'll tolerate and what you won't. And I've already decided I'm not leaving because of a broken window." Beatrice looked at her sideways. "You're very strange." "I've been called worse." A small smile. There and gone in a heartbeat. Then Beatrice's expression went serious again. "He's coming back today," she said. "Uncle Rowan, Mrs. Helmsley told Cook last night. She thinks we don't listen, but we do. We hear everything." Eveline's stomach dropped. "Today?" "This afternoon. He's been in London for 2 weeks. He always leaves when a new governess arrives. Doesn't want to be here for the— What did Mrs. Helmsley call it? The inevitable failure." Beatrice's jaw tightened. "He doesn't think anyone can handle us." "Can you blame him? You've driven off 6 people." "We didn't ask for any of them." Beatrice stood up suddenly, her bandaged hand clenched into a fist. "We didn't ask to be here. We didn't ask for our parents to die. We didn't ask for an uncle who doesn't want us and servants who hate us, and a house that feels like a prison." Her voice echoed off the walls. Down the hall, a door opened. Thomas peeked out, hair sticking up at odd angles, eyes worried. "Bea?" he called softly. "Are you okay?" Beatrice's face crumpled, just for a second. Then she sucked in a breath and forced it back into that hard, angry mask. "I'm fine," she said. "Go back to bed." "It's morning," Thomas pointed out, "and I'm hungry." "Then go down to the kitchen." "They won't let us," Thomas said. "They never let us. They say we make too much mess." Eveline stood up. "Then I'll take you." "You can't," Beatrice started. "Watch me." She held out her hand to Thomas. He stared at it for a moment like it might be a trap, then took it, his small fingers wrapping around hers. Clara appeared in her doorway too, rubbing her eyes, her hair a bird's nest of tangles. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Breakfast," Eveline said. "All of us. Together." Beatrice opened her mouth to argue, saw the look on Eveline's face, and closed it again. She followed them downstairs without another word. The kitchen went silent when they walked in. The cook stopped stirring whatever was in the pot on the stove. The maids froze mid-task. Mrs. Helmsley's teacup paused halfway to her lips. "Miss Laurent," she said coldly, "the children take their meals upstairs." "Not any more," Eveline said. She pulled out chairs at the long wooden table. "Sit," she told the children. They sat. Thomas immediately. Clara after a moment's hesitation. Beatrice last, her chin lifted in defiance, even though her bandaged hand was trembling slightly. "This is highly irregular," Mrs. Helmsley began. "So is starving children." Eveline looked at the cook. "What's for breakfast?" "Porridge," the woman said, caught off guard. "And bread, and—" "Perfect. 4 bowls, please." "Now see here," Mrs. Helmsley set down her teacup hard enough to rattle the saucer. "You do not give orders in this kitchen. You do not—" "I'm not giving orders," Eveline interrupted. "I'm requesting breakfast for 3 children who are in my care. Unless you'd prefer I write to the Duke and explain that his wards are being denied basic meals?" The silence that followed was razor sharp. Mrs. Helmsley's face went tight. "You overstep, Miss Laurent." "Perhaps, but they're still hungry." Eveline pulled out a chair for herself and sat down like she owned the place. 4 bowls of porridge. "Unless you'd like to explain to His Grace why his brother's children are skin and bones when he returns this afternoon." Another beat of frozen silence. Then the cook, with a glance at Mrs. Helmsley that Eveline couldn't quite read, ladled porridge into 4 bowls and brought them to the table. It was bland, unseasoned, lumpy, but it was hot, and it was food, and the children ate like they were starving, which Eveline was beginning to suspect they might actually be. "Slowly," she murmured to Clara, who was shoveling porridge into her mouth so fast she was barely breathing. "You'll make yourself sick." Clara slowed down, marginally. Beatrice ate in careful, controlled bites, her eyes on Mrs. Helmsley the entire time, like she was waiting for the housekeeper to snatch the bowl away, like this was a test she was determined not to fail. Thomas ate quietly, methodically, and whispered "thank you" when he was done. When they'd finished, Eveline stood. "We need to discuss the children's schedule," she said to Mrs. Helmsley. "That can wait until after you've met with the Duke." "It can't, actually." Eveline kept her voice level, polite. "Because I need to know what's expected before he arrives, unless you'd prefer I go into that meeting blind and make him think you've been doing nothing to help." Mrs. Helmsley's expression could have frozen the sun, but she nodded. Once. Sharp. "My office, 10 minutes." She swept out of the kitchen, the maids scattering in her wake like startled birds. Eveline turned to the children. "Go upstairs, get dressed. Properly dressed. I want to see you in clean clothes, with your hair brushed and your faces washed. Can you do that?" "Why?" Beatrice asked suspiciously. "Because when your uncle arrives, I want him to see that you're not wild animals. I want him to see that you're children who deserve to be treated like children." "He won't care," Beatrice said flatly. "He never does." "Maybe, but we're going to make him look anyway." Something flickered in Beatrice's eyes. Not quite hope, but maybe the memory of what hope used to feel like. She nodded. "Come on," she told her siblings. "You heard her. Let's go." They filed out, Clara taking Eveline's hand briefly as she passed and squeezing it once before following her brother and sister upstairs. Eveline waited until they were gone. Then she let out a long, shaky breath and pressed her hands flat against the table to stop them from trembling. She was terrified. Absolutely, bone-deep terrified. But she couldn't let them see that. Mrs. Helmsley's office was a small, spare room on the ground floor with a desk, 2 chairs, and shelves lined with ledgers and household accounts. The housekeeper sat behind the desk like a general behind fortifications. "Sit," she said. Eveline sat. "You've lasted longer than the others," Mrs. Helmsley began. "I'll give you that. But lasting 1 night does not make you qualified to— "What happened to them?" Eveline interrupted. Mrs. Helmsley blinked. "Excuse me?" "The children's parents. How did they die?" A pause, then reluctantly. "Carriage accident. 6 months ago. The road was icy. The driver lost control." Lord Edmund and his wife were killed instantly. The children survived without a scratch. Evelyn's chest tightened. And the Duke took them in. He had no choice. He's the only living relative, but he's unmarried. No experience with children, and he has responsibilities. The estate, business in London. He cannot be here all the time. So he's never here. That is not... Mrs. Helmsley stopped, adjusted the ledger in front of her. His Grace does what he can, which is nothing, apparently. You do not understand the situation. Then explain it to me. Evelyn leaned forward. Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like 3 children lost their parents and got dumped in a house where no one wants them, where the staff treats them like inconveniences, where they're locked upstairs and forgotten about until the next governess shows up to fail. Mrs. Helmsley's face went stiff. We do our duty. Your duty is to care for them. And you're not doing that. You're managing them, like livestock, like problems to be contained. How dare you? I dare because someone has to. Evelyn's voice stayed steady even though her heart was racing. Those children are grieving. They're angry and scared and they don't trust anyone because everyone keeps leaving. And instead of helping them, you're making it worse. We have tried. Have you? Evelyn challenged. Have you really? Or have you just followed the Duke's orders to keep them quiet and out of sight? Silence. Long and heavy and damning. Mrs. Helmsley's hands were flat on the desk, knuckles white. What do you want? She asked finally. I want the children to eat 3 meals a day, downstairs, at a proper table. I want them to have clean clothes and regular baths. I want the nursery cleaned and repaired. I want them treated like human beings instead of inconveniences. And in return? In return, I'll make sure they stop destroying the house. I'll make sure they behave when the Duke is in residence. I'll do the job you've been paying other women to fail at. Mrs. Helmsley studied her, looking for cracks probably, looking for weakness. The Duke will not approve, she said finally. Then let me worry about the Duke. He is not a man who tolerates insubordination. Good thing I'm not planning to be insubordinate. Evelyn stood. I'm planning to do my job, which is more than the last 6 women did. She walked out before Mrs. Helmsley could respond. Her hands were shaking again. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. But she'd done it. She'd stood her ground. She'd fought. Now she just had to survive the Duke. The children were waiting in the hallway when she got back upstairs, and they looked different. Thomas had on a clean shirt and trousers, his hair combed back from his face. Clara wore a simple dress, pale yellow, a little worn but clean, and someone had braided her hair. Badly, but it was braided. And Beatrice. Beatrice stood in front of her siblings in a dark blue dress with her hair pulled back and her bandaged hand clasped in front of her, and she looked like a young lady instead of a wild thing. You did this yourselves? Evelyn asked. I helped Clara, Beatrice said. Thomas dressed himself. Is it all right? It's perfect. Evelyn's throat felt tight. You're perfect. We're not, Beatrice said quietly. But we're trying. That's all anyone can ask. And they spent the morning in the nursery. Evelyn taught them a card game her mother had taught her. Nothing complicated, just something to pass the time. Clara won twice and crowed about it. Thomas laughed, genuine and sweet. Even Beatrice smiled. For a few hours, it almost felt normal. Then, just past noon, they heard it. Hoofbeats on gravel, the creak of carriage wheels, voices shouting orders. Beatrice's face went pale. He's here. Stay calm, Evelyn said. Remember what we talked about. You're not wild. You're not animals. You're children who deserve respect. He won't see it that way, Thomas whispered. Then we'll make him. Footsteps in the hall below. Heavy. Deliberate. Moving through the house like they owned it, which, Evelyn supposed, they did. Mrs. Helmsley's voice, clipped and formal. Your Grace, welcome home. A man's voice, low and rough. Where are they? Upstairs, Your Grace, with the new governess. A pause. Then, another one? Yes, Your Grace. Miss Laurent arrived yesterday. How long did the last one last? 11 minutes, Your Grace. A sound that might have been a laugh, bitter and cold. Wonderful. Send her down. I want to see what we're wasting money on this time. Evelyn stood, smoothed her dress, took a breath. Stay here, she told the children. I'll come get you when it's time. He's going to hate you, Beatrice said. Not mean, just factual. Probably. Evelyn managed a smile. Wish me luck anyway. She walked downstairs alone, her head high, her spine straight, and tried not to think about how thoroughly this could all fall apart in the next 10 minutes. The Duke was in the drawing room. She saw him before he saw her. Standing with his back to the door, staring out the window at the dead gardens beyond, one hand braced against the frame. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair that needed cutting, clothes that were expensive but rumpled, like he'd slept in them. Your Grace, Mrs. Helmsley said from beside Evelyn. Miss Laurent. He turned, and Evelyn forgot how to breathe. He was younger than she'd expected. 30, maybe 32. Not handsome. His face was too hard for that, all sharp angles and harsh lines, but striking, compelling. Gray eyes that looked like winter storms, a mouth set in a permanent scowl, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow that made him look dangerous. He looked at Evelyn the way you'd look at a stain on expensive furniture. Miss Laurent, he said. His voice was dark whiskey and gravel. How long do you think you'll last? Not welcome, not pleased to meet you, just that. Evelyn lifted her chin. Longer than 11 minutes, Your Grace. His eyebrow, the scarred one, rose fractionally. Confident. Realistic. The last governess said the same thing. The last governess didn't have the benefit of meeting your wards before running away. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. Or annoyance. Hard to tell. And what did you think of them? He asked. My wards. The way he said it, like the word tasted bad. I think they're grieving, Evelyn said carefully. I think they're angry, and I think they've been let down by every adult who was supposed to care for them. The room went very, very quiet. Mrs. Helmsley made a small sound, almost a gasp. The Duke's expression went cold. You've been here one day, and you presume to lecture me about— I'm not lecturing. Evelyn kept her voice steady. I'm telling you what I observed. You asked. I answered. I asked what you thought of the children, not what you thought of me. The two things are connected, Your Grace. His jaw tightened. Mrs. Helmsley, leave us. Your Grace, I don't think— Now! The housekeeper fled. The moment the door closed, the Duke crossed the room in 3 long strides and stopped directly in front of Evelyn, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could smell leather and horses and something sharp like anger. Let me make something very clear, Miss Laurent, he said quietly, dangerously. I did not ask for those children. I did not want them, but I'm stuck with them because my brother was careless enough to die and leave them with no one else. I provide for them. I house them. I pay for governesses who inevitably fail and run away screaming. That is the extent of my obligation. Is it? Evelyn's heart was hammering, but she didn't back down, didn't step away. Because it seems to me your obligation includes making sure they're fed and clothed and treated like they matter. They're fed. They're clothed. Barely. They're locked upstairs like prisoners. They're starving for attention, and you're not here to give it. I have responsibilities. So do they. Evelyn's voice rose before she could stop it. They're children. They lost their parents. They need someone to— To what? He leaned in closer. To love them? To fix them? Is that what you think you're going to do, Miss Laurent? Swoop in and save them with kindness and good intentions? I think someone has to try. And when you fail? When they drive you away like all the others? What then? Then at least I tried. She was breathing hard now, hands clenched into fists. Which is more than you're doing. His hand shot out. For one terrible second she thought he was going to grab her, strike her. He didn't. He pointed toward the door. Get out, he said quietly. No. His eyes went wide. What did you say? I said no. Evelyn's legs were shaking, but she locked her knees. You hired me to care for those children. That's what I'm going to do. If you want me gone, you'll have to throw me out yourself. Don't tempt me. I'm not tempting. I'm telling you. She took a step closer. Those children upstairs need stability. They need routine. They need someone who won't abandon them the second things get difficult. And right now, I'm the only person in this entire house who's willing to give them that. So unless you want to explain to your solicitor why you're firing the only governess who lasted more than a day, I suggest you let me do my job. They stared at each other. His chest was rising and falling like he'd run a mile. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them behind her back. Then, impossibly, his mouth curved. Not a smile. Something sharper. "You have nerve," he said. "I'll give you that. I have a job to do. For now." He stepped back, putting distance between them. "But understand this, Miss Laurent. I am not a patient man. I do not tolerate chaos. And if those children continue to destroy my house, they won't. You can't promise that. Watch me." Another long silence. Then he turned away, waving one hand dismissively. "Fine. You have 1 week. Prove you can handle them. If you can't..." He looked back over his shoulder. "There's always the next candidate." He walked out without another word. Eveline's knees almost gave out. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself, breathing hard, her heart pounding so violently she thought she might be sick. She'd done it. She'd stood up to him, challenged him, and survived. For now. She was halfway back to the stairs when she heard his voice again, coming from the study, talking to Mrs. Helmsley. "Insufferable woman, arrogant, presumptuous. Shall I dismiss her, Your Grace?" A pause. Then, grudgingly, "No, let her try. She'll fail soon enough." Eveline smiled despite herself and kept walking. The children were clustered at the top of the stairs, clearly eavesdropping. "You're still here," Beatrice said, almost accusatory, like she couldn't quite believe it. "I'm still here. He didn't send you away." "He tried. I refused." Thomas's eyes went huge. "You refused the Duke?" "I did." Clara giggled. "You're crazy." "Probably." Eveline held out her hands. "Come on, let's go make dinner." "We're not allowed in the kitchen," Beatrice started. "We are now." She led them downstairs into the kitchen where the cook was preparing the evening meal and announced that the children would be eating at the table, with everyone else, every night. The cook looked at Mrs. Helmsley. Mrs. Helmsley looked toward the study where the Duke was. But she didn't say no. And that night, for the first time in 6 months, 3 children sat at a table and ate a proper meal, while adults talked around them like they were part of the household instead of prisoners in the attic. Eveline watched them, Clara chattering about a bird she'd seen outside her window, Thomas quietly eating but smiling, Beatrice carefully not looking at her uncle who sat at the head of the table and said nothing but didn't leave either, and felt that dangerous hope flicker brighter. Maybe this could work. Maybe she could actually do this. The Duke caught her eye across the table. His expression was unreadable. Cold. But he didn't send her away, and for now, that was enough. The week that followed felt like walking a tightrope over broken glass. Eveline woke before dawn every morning, dressed in the dark, and went upstairs to wake the children. Breakfast at 7 sharp. Lessons until noon. Reading, arithmetic, history, anything she could cobble together from the dusty books in the library that no one had touched in years. Lunch. Afternoon walks in the gardens when the weather allowed, which was rare because England in November was apparently designed to punish anyone foolish enough to go outside. Dinner at 6. Bed by 8. Structure. Routine. The things grieving children needed even when they fought against them. And they did fight. Of course they did. Clara threw a tantrum the second morning because she wanted cake for breakfast. Thomas refused to do his sums and hid under the desk for an hour. Beatrice challenged every single thing Eveline said, testing boundaries like she was trying to find the breaking point. But Eveline didn't break. She bribed Clara with the promise of dessert after dinner if she ate her porridge. She sat on the floor next to the desk and did math problems out loud until Thomas got curious enough to crawl out and correct her deliberately wrong answers. She let Beatrice argue and push back and question everything, and then calmly explained her reasoning until the girl ran out of steam. It was exhausting. It was working. By the 4th day, Clara stopped throwing food. Thomas started raising his hand to ask questions during lessons. Beatrice still challenged everything, but there was less venom in it, less desperation. They were starting to trust her. The Duke, on the other hand, was a different problem entirely. He'd stayed at Blackthorn Hall instead of returning to London, which apparently was unusual enough that Mrs. Helmsley mentioned it 3 separate times with increasing alarm. He spent most of his time locked in his study, emerging only for meals and the occasional inspection of the estate. He barely spoke to the children, barely acknowledged Evelyn's existence. But he was watching. She could feel it. The weight of his attention like a physical thing. He'd appear in doorways while she was teaching, stand there for 30 seconds without saying a word, then disappear again. He'd pause in the hallway when the children were laughing during dinner, his expression unreadable. He'd corner Mrs. Helmsley and grill her about schedules and behaviors and whether Evelyn was managing adequately. It was unnerving, and it was about to get worse. The invitation arrived on the 5th morning. Evelyn was in the library with the children, trying to explain the difference between metaphor and simile to Beatrice, while Thomas practiced his handwriting and Clara colored in the margins of a book she'd already declared boring, when Mrs. Helmsley appeared in the doorway looking like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Miss Laurent, a word." Evelyn looked up. "I'm in the middle of now." The tone left no room for argument. Evelyn told the children to continue working and followed the housekeeper into the hall. Mrs. Helmsley thrust a cream-colored envelope at her, heavy paper, wax seal, the kind of thing that screamed money and importance. "What is this?" Evelyn asked. "An invitation. From Lord and Lady Ashford. They're hosting a ball next week. His Grace has been invited. And you." Evelyn blinked. "Me? Why would I—" "The children are included in the invitation." Mrs. Helmsley's voice was tight, disapproving. "Lord Ashford is an old friend of the Duke's. He's expressed interest in meeting the new governess who's taming the Blackthorn terrors." She made it sound like a curse. "Apparently word is spread about your success here." "Success is a strong word," Evelyn muttered, staring at the invitation. "It's only been 5 days." 5 days longer than anyone else. Mrs. Helmsley crossed her arms. "His Grace has accepted on behalf of the household. You'll attend. The children will attend, and you will ensure they behave impeccably. Any embarrassment reflects on this house. Do you understand?" "I understand you're setting me up to fail." Mrs. Helmsley's expression didn't change. "The carriage leaves at 6. You have 1 week to prepare 3 children who've never attended a formal event in their lives. I suggest you use the time wisely." She walked away, heels clicking like gunshots on marble. Evelyn stood there holding the invitation and felt the tightrope she'd been walking start to sway. A ball, with nobility, with people who would judge every move, every word, every tiny mistake, with children who'd been locked away like shameful secrets and were now expected to perform like trained animals. This was a test, a trap, and she had no choice but to walk straight into it. She went back to the library. The children looked up as she entered, their expressions wary. "What did Mrs. Helmsley want?" Beatrice asked. Evelyn sat down heavily in the chair by the window. "We're going to a ball." Dead silence. Then Clara squealed, "A ball? With dancing and pretty dresses?" "I suppose so." "I'm not going," Beatrice said immediately. "You have to go." "I won't. You can't make me." "Beatrice, they'll stare at us." Her voice went sharp, high. "They'll whisper about us, about how our parents died, about how we're cursed or broken or wrong. They'll look at us like we're freaks, and I won't. I can't." Her breath hitched. She pressed her hands over her face. Evelyn crossed the room and knelt in front of her chair. "Hey, look at me." Beatrice shook her head. "Look at me," Evelyn repeated gently. Slowly, Beatrice lowered her hands. Her eyes were wet. "You're right," Evelyn said. "They probably will stare. They'll whisper. Some of them will be cruel. But you know what else?" "What?" "You're going to walk into that room with your head high and your shoulders back, and you're going to show them that you're not ashamed, that you're not broken, that you survived something terrible and you're still here. I don't want to be stared at. I know, but hiding won't make it better. It just makes them think they won." Evelyn reached out and took Beatrice's hands. "I'll be there. Your uncle will be there. You won't be alone. Uncle Rowan hates us. He doesn't hate you. He doesn't want us. That's worse." Evelyn didn't have an answer for that. because Beatrice was probably right. Please, she said instead, just try. For me. Beatrice stared at her for a long moment. Then reluctantly she nodded. Clara was already planning her dress. Thomas looked terrified but didn't argue. 1 week to turn 3 traumatized children into presentable young nobles. No pressure. The next 7 days were chaos. Evelyn requisitioned fabric from Mrs. Helmsley, who provided it with the air of someone watching a ship sail toward rocks, and spent every evening after the children were asleep sewing clothes by candlelight. Her fingers bled from needle pricks. Her eyes ached from squinting in dim light. But she finished, a dark blue dress for Beatrice, a soft pink one for Clara, a proper suit for Thomas. During the day, she drilled them on etiquette, how to bow, how to curtsy, which fork to use, how to make polite conversation without saying anything that might be used as ammunition later. "Why do we have to pretend to care about the weather?" Clara complained. "Because talking about real things makes people uncomfortable," Evelyn explained. "Weather is safe. Everyone experiences it. No one gets offended. That's stupid." "Welcome to high society." Beatrice struggled with the curtsy. She was tall for her age, gangly and self-conscious about it, and she kept losing her balance. "I look ridiculous," she muttered after the 5th failed attempt. "You look fine. Try again." "I can't." "You can. One more time." Beatrice gritted her teeth and tried again. This time she managed it without wobbling. "See?" Evelyn smiled. "Perfect. It's not perfect. It's barely adequate. Adequate is better than nothing." Thomas picked up the etiquette quickly. He was quiet but observant, watching everything, absorbing it like a sponge. He practiced his bow until it was flawless, then helped Clara with hers when she got frustrated. "You're good at this," Evelyn told him. He ducked his head, embarrassed. I don't want to embarrass Uncle Rowan." "You won't. He already thinks we're a burden. If we mess up in front of his friends, then they'll think less of him, not you. And frankly, he deserves it for abandoning you in the first place." Thomas's eyes went wide. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Probably not," Evelyn agreed. "But it's true." The Duke himself remained a ghost, present but distant. He'd nod at them during meals, ask perfunctory questions about their progress. But he never stayed long enough for real conversation, never asked how they were feeling, never acknowledged that this entire performance was his idea. Until the night before the ball. Evelyn was in her room, making final adjustments to Clara's dress, when someone knocked on her door. She opened it, expecting Mrs. Helmsley with another list of rules. It was the Duke. He stood in the hallway looking uncomfortable, like he'd never been on this floor before and wasn't sure he wanted to be here now. "Your Grace," Evelyn said, surprised. "Is something wrong?" "I need to speak with you." "Of course. Come in." He hesitated, then stepped inside. The room was tiny. His presence filled it completely, made the walls feel closer. "The ball tomorrow," he began without preamble. "I want to make something clear." "I'm listening." "This is important. Lord Ashford is influential. His opinion carries weight. If the children embarrass me, they won't." "You can't know that." "I can. I've been working with them all week. They're ready." He looked at her like he didn't believe it. "Beatrice has a temper. Thomas is painfully shy. Clara is 7 years old and has the attention span of a gnat. They're also smart, resilient, and braver than you give them credit for." "You've known them for a week, Miss Laurent. I've known them their entire lives." "Have you?" The words were out before she could stop them. "Because from what I've seen, you've spent more time avoiding them than knowing them." His jaw tightened. "You overstep." "So you keep saying, but someone needs to." Evelyn set down the dress and faced him fully. "Those children worship you. They're terrified of disappointing you, and you barely look at them." "That's not—" "When was the last time you asked Thomas about his interests, or played a game with Clara, or told Beatrice she's doing a good job?" "I provide for them. You house them. There's a difference." Evelyn's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "They don't need a landlord, Your Grace. They need family." The silence that followed was suffocating. The Duke's hands clenched at his sides. A muscle jumped in his jaw. For a moment, she thought he might actually shout at her. Instead, he said quietly, "You think I don't know that?" It was so unexpected that Evelyn faltered. What? You think I don't know I'm failing them? He looked away, staring at the wall like it held answers. My brother was everything I'm not. Patient, kind, good with children. He would have been a better guardian to them than I ever will be. But he's not here. No, he's dead, because he was careless and took a bad road in bad weather, and now I'm stuck trying to fix something I never wanted and don't know how to handle. So you run away. I give them space. You abandoned them, Evelyn corrected, just like everyone else has. He flinched, actually flinched. Tomorrow, he said, his voice hard again. Professional. They will behave. They will be polite. They will not cause a scene. If they do, they won't. If they do, he continued as if she hadn't spoken, there will be consequences. For them. For you. Do you understand? Perfectly. He left without another word. Evelyn sank down onto her bed and pressed her hands over her face. Tomorrow was going to be a disaster. She could feel it. The day of the ball arrived gray and cold, with rain hammering against the windows like it was trying to break through. The children were quiet during breakfast, nervous. Claire kept fidgeting with her napkin. Thomas barely ate. Beatrice stared at her plate like it had personally offended her. We don't have to do this, Evelyn said gently. If you really don't want to go... We have to, Beatrice interrupted. You said so yourself. Hiding won't make it better. I know what I said, but we'll go. We'll behave. We'll make sure Uncle Rowan isn't embarrassed. She looked up and her eyes were blazing. And then he'll have no excuse to send us away. He's not going to... He might. If we're too much trouble. If we cost him too much. We heard him talking to his solicitor last month. About boarding schools. About other options. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Beatrice, so we'll be perfect, and maybe he'll let us stay. The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking. Listen to me, Evelyn said firmly. All three of you. Whatever happens tonight, you are not being sent away. I won't let it happen. You can't stop him, Thomas said quietly. Watch me. The carriage arrived at 5. The children were already dressed, uncomfortable in their formal clothes, but presentable. Beautiful, even. Evelyn had managed something simple for herself, a dark green dress she'd owned for years, mended and altered so many times it was barely recognizable, but it fit and it was appropriate. The Duke was waiting by the door, looking severe in black evening wear that probably cost more than Evelyn made in a year. His eyes swept over the children, lingered on each of them. You look acceptable, he said finally. Not good, not wonderful, acceptable. Clara's face fell. Thomas looked at the floor. They look better than acceptable, Evelyn said sharply. They look lovely. The Duke's gaze shifted to her. Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe, or annoyance, but he didn't argue. They loaded into the carriage in tense silence. The ride to the Ashford estate took an hour. The children stared out the windows at rain-soaked countryside. The Duke read correspondence and ignored everyone. Evelyn tried not to think about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. When they finally arrived, the house was ablaze with light. Carriages lined the drive. Music drifted through open doors. Laughter and conversation spilled out into the wet night. The Duke climbed out first. Then he turned and offered his hand to help the children down. Beatrice took it hesitantly. Clara grabbed it and jumped, nearly making him stumble. Thomas descended carefully, eyes wide. Evelyn came last. Stay close, the Duke told the children. Be polite. Do not speak unless spoken to. And for heaven's sake, don't touch anything. We know, Beatrice muttered. They walked inside together. The ballroom was enormous. Crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed walls. A sea of people in silk and satin, all talking and laughing and drinking champagne like the world outside wasn't dark and cold and cruel. Every head turned when they entered. The music didn't stop, but it might as well have. Conversations died. People whispered behind fans and gloved hands. Is that Blackthorn's wards? Poor things. I heard they're completely wild. Evelyn felt the children tense. Clara grabbed her hand. Thomas moved closer to his uncle. Beatrice's face went blank. That terrible mask she wore when she was trying not to cry. The Duke's expression didn't change. He just walked forward, head high, like he didn't hear the whispers. They followed. Lord Ashford materialized from the crowd, an older man, white-haired and jovial, with a booming voice that carried across the room. "Blackthorn, wonderful to see you!" He clapped the Duke on the shoulder, then turned to the children. "And these must be the young ones. My goodness, how you've grown." Had he met them before? Evelyn couldn't tell. "Children, greet Lord Ashford properly," the Duke said. Thomas bowed. The girls curtsied, all of them perfect, exactly as they'd practiced. Lord Ashford beamed. "Excellent, excellent. And this must be the famous governess." He turned to Evelyn. "Miss Laurent, I presume? I've heard remarkable things. Turning these three into proper young nobles in less than a fortnight, quite the accomplishment." "They were always proper," Evelyn said. "They just needed someone to see it." Something in her tone made the Duke glance at her sharply. Lord Ashford laughed. "Well said. Come, come. Let me introduce you around. There are several families here who've been curious to meet the Blackthorn children." The next hour was a blur. Introductions. Polite conversation. The children performing exactly as they'd been taught, bowing, curtsying, answering questions in soft voices, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. They were perfect, and Evelyn could see it was killing them. Beatrice's smile was brittle. Thomas kept clenching and unclenching his fists behind his back. Clara held onto Evelyn's skirt so tightly the fabric was starting to tear. But they didn't break, didn't falter, until he walked in. Evelyn saw him before anyone else did. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed, handsome in the way that always hid cruelty underneath. Armand Vale. Her heart stopped. No, not here, not now. But it was him, moving through the crowd like he owned it, shaking hands, kissing ladies' fingers, laughing that laugh she used to think was charming before she learned what it really meant. And then his eyes found her. Recognition, surprise. Then something worse, satisfaction. He changed direction, started walking toward her. "Evelyn," the Duke said beside her, "are you all right? You've gone pale." She couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. Armand stopped in front of her, smiled. "Evelyn Laurent, what an unexpected pleasure." The Duke's expression shifted. "You know Miss Laurent? Know her?" Armand's smile widened. "We were engaged to be married, before before circumstances changed." The world tilted. The Duke looked at Evelyn. "Is this true?" It's complicated," she managed. "Hardly complicated," Armand said smoothly. "We were in love, weren't we, darling? Until you decided to run away rather than honor your commitments." "That's not what happened." "No? Then why did you disappear in the middle of the night? Why did you flee Paris without a word?" People were staring now, listening. The whisper started again, louder this time. "I didn't flee," Evelyn said, but her voice was shaking. "You married someone else. After you abandoned me. What was I supposed to do? Wait forever? You were engaged to her while you were courting me." A misunderstanding. A lie. The music had stopped. Everyone was watching. The Duke's hand closed around Evelyn's arm. Not gentle. "We're leaving." "No," she said. "I didn't do anything wrong. You brought scandal into my house." "I brought nothing. He's the one—" "Enough." The Duke turned to the children. "Get your coats. We're going, now." Beatrice stared at Evelyn, betrayal written across her face. "You lied to us." "I didn't—" "You said you wouldn't leave. You said you'd stay." Her voice cracked. "You're just like everyone else." She turned and ran. Thomas followed. Clara looked between Evelyn and her uncle, tears streaming down her face, then fled too. Evelyn tried to go after them, but the Duke's grip tightened. "Let them go," he said coldly. "This isn't what it looks like. It looks like you came into my home under false pretenses. It looks like you've been hiding scandal that could destroy my family's reputation. It looks—" He leaned in close, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Like I made a terrible mistake trusting you." He released her arm and walked away, following the children. Evelyn stood alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by staring faces and whispers and Armand's satisfied smile, and felt everything she'd built crumble to ash. Evelyn didn't move for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The ballroom pressed in around her. All those faces, all those eyes, all that judgment wrapped in silk and pearls and false politeness. Armand stood 3 feet away, still wearing that smile that had once made her heart race and now just made her sick. "Well," he said quietly, just for her. "That went better than expected." Something inside her snapped. "You planned this." Her voice came out steady, cold. "You knew I'd be here." "I knew the Duke of Blackthorn had finally hired a governess who lasted more than a day. I didn't know it was you until I walked in." He tilted his head, examining her like she was something curious he'd found under a rock. "Though I'll admit, once I realized, I couldn't resist. You always did have a talent for landing on your feet, Evelyn. Even when you shouldn't." "What do you want?" "Want? Nothing. I'm engaged to Lady Margaret Ashford now, Lord Ashford's niece. Quite the step up from a seamstress's daughter, wouldn't you say?" The insult landed like he meant it to. But Evelyn had spent the last 2 weeks fighting battles with children who threw furniture and a duke who threw accusations. Armand's cruelty felt almost quaint by comparison. "Then why are you still talking to me?" she asked. "Because I wanted to see your face when you lost everything. Again." He leaned in, lowered his voice so only she could hear. "You thought you could reinvent yourself? Pretend Paris never happened? You're still the same desperate girl who threw herself at me, and everyone here knows it now." Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered what she'd ever seen in this man. Had he always been this small? This petty? Had she been so starved for affection that she'd mistaken manipulation for love? "You're right about one thing," she said. "I did throw myself at you. That was my mistake. But the difference between then and now?" She stepped closer, met his eyes without flinching. "I don't need you anymore. I don't need anyone's approval. Not yours, not theirs." She gestured at the watching crowd. "I came here with nothing, and I'm leaving with nothing, so you haven't taken anything from me that I didn't already survive losing once." His smile faltered, just for a second, but she saw it. "Enjoy your engagement," Evelyn said. "I hope Lady Margaret realizes what she's getting before it's too late." She turned and walked away. Out of the ballroom, down the marble hall with its expensive paintings and crystal sconces, through the front doors into the rain that was still falling like the sky had something to prove. No coat, no carriage, no plan. Just the same certainty she'd felt that first day at Blackthorn Hall, that walking away from something that hurt her was better than staying and letting it destroy her. The gravel drive crunched under her feet. Rain soaked through her dress in seconds, plastering her hair to her face, running down her back in cold rivulets. She didn't care. She just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, away from the lights and the music and the whispers. She made it halfway down the drive before she heard footsteps behind her. Running, splashing through puddles. "Miss Laurent!" Not the Duke, not Armand. A woman's voice, breathless and urgent. Evelyn turned. Lady Ashford, Lord Ashford's wife, not the niece, was hurrying after her with a cloak in her hands and an expression that was somewhere between concern and fury. Her own dress was getting soaked, but she didn't seem to notice. "You'll catch your death," she said, throwing the cloak around Evelyn's shoulders without waiting for permission. "What were you thinking? Leaving like that?" "I was thinking I'm not welcome here. Because of that insufferable man? Armand Vale?" Lady Ashford made a sound of disgust. "I knew his father. Charming liar, just like his son. The apple doesn't fall far." Evelyn blinked rain out of her eyes. "You don't even know me. Why do you care?" "Because I was watching you with those children earlier." Lady Ashford's voice softened. "I saw how they looked at you, how they trusted you. And then I saw how you defended them when that horrid woman, Lady Pemberton, I think, made a comment about their mother dying in disgrace." "I didn't." "You absolutely did. You smiled very sweetly and said something about how grief brings out people's true character, and some people have more character than others. I thought Lady Pemberton was going to faint." She smiled, rain dripping from her nose. It was magnificent. Despite everything, despite the humiliation and the anger and the fear, Evelyn almost laughed. "The point is," Lady Ashford continued, taking her arm firmly, "whatever happened in Paris doesn't matter. What matters is what you've done here. Those children haven't been seen in public since their parents died. Everyone said they were unmanageable, violent, that the Duke would have to send them away to some institution. And yet tonight they were polite, composed, and braver than most adults I know. You did that. I just gave them structure. Anyone could have, but no one did. 6 other women tried and failed. You succeeded. Lady Ashford started pulling her back toward the house. Now come inside before you drown. We'll sort this out. There's nothing to sort out. The Duke made his position clear. The Duke, Lady Ashford said tartly, is an idiot, but he's not an irredeemable one. Come, please. If you won't do it for yourself, do it for those children. They looked devastated when they ran out. That stopped Evelyn in her tracks. Where are they now? With my housekeeper, being fed cake and tea, but they keep asking for you. Evelyn's chest tightened. They think I lied to them. Then tell them the truth. I tried. No one wanted to hear it. Then make them hear it. Lady Ashford's grip on her arm was surprisingly strong for someone so slight. I've been in society for 30 years, Miss Laurent. I've seen scandals that would make your situation look like a minor social misstep. And you know what I've learned? The only people who survive are the ones who refuse to be ashamed. So stop running and fight back. Evelyn let herself be led back inside, water dripping from her hair and dress, leaving a trail across expensive marble. The ballroom had cleared somewhat, people gravitating toward the dining room where dinner was being served, though she could still hear the whispers following her like ghosts. Lady Ashford steered her toward a small sitting room off the main hall and closed the door firmly behind them. Wait here, she ordered. I'll find the children, and the Duke, and we'll settle this like civilized people instead of characters in a bad melodrama. He won't listen. He will if I make him. Lady Ashford's smile was sharp. I've known Rowan Blackthorne since he was in short pants. He's stubborn and proud, and occasionally thick as a post. But he's not cruel, not really. He just needs someone to knock some sense into him. She swept out, leaving Evelyn alone in a room full of expensive furniture and portraits of dead Ashford staring down at her with varying degrees of disapproval. Evelyn sank into a chair and tried to organize her thoughts into something coherent. What would she even say? That Armand had courted her for months, promised marriage, let her believe she finally had a future, and then casually mentioned he was already engaged to someone else the week before their supposed wedding? That she'd left Paris because staying would have destroyed her? That she'd spent 3 months sleeping on a boarding house floor, taking in mending work for pennies, until the agency found her this position? It sounded pathetic even in her own head. The door opened. Not Lady Ashford, not the children, the Duke. He stood in the doorway looking like a storm barely contained. His evening coat was disheveled, his cravat loosened, his hair standing up like he'd been running his hands through it. His jaw was tight, his hands were clenched at his sides. His eyes were cold enough to freeze blood. The children are with Lady Ashford, he said without preamble, eating cake. She suggested we talk. Actually, she demanded we talk. And when I said I had nothing to say to you, she threatened to tell everyone at dinner about the time I got drunk at Cambridge and tried to steal a statue of Aristotle. Despite everything, Evelyn felt her mouth twitch. Did you succeed? That's not the point. He stepped inside and closed the door. You owe me an explanation. I owe you nothing. You came into my house under false pretenses. I came into your house desperate and honest about everything except the one thing that had nothing to do with my ability to care for your wards. Evelyn stood up. She was done being small, done apologizing for surviving. Yes, I was engaged. Yes, it ended badly. Yes, I left Paris to escape it, but I never lied about who I was or what I could do. You hid scandal. I hid heartbreak. There's a difference. Her voice rose. What was I supposed to say? Hello, Your Grace. I'm an excellent governess. But fair warning, I was stupid enough to trust a man who made me promises he never intended to keep. Would that have made you more likely to hire me? He didn't answer. I thought not. Evelyn grabbed the cloak Lady Ashford had given her and headed for the door. Consider this my resignation, effective immediately. You can't resign. Watch me. The children need you. The children need stability, consistency, and they can't have that with someone whose presence brings scandal into the house. You said so yourself, in front of everyone. She tried to push past him. He didn't move, just stood there blocking the doorway with his considerable height and shoulders that suddenly seemed to take up the entire frame. "I was angry," he said. "You were humiliated, in front of your peers. I understand perfectly, but that doesn't change anything. It changes everything." He ran a hand through his hair, making it even more disheveled. "Evelyn, Miss Laurent, I spoke without thinking. I shouldn't have. I reacted poorly." "You reacted exactly how any nobleman would when his employee embarrasses him in public. You're not—" He stopped, took a breath, started again. "You're more than an employee." The words hung between them like smoke. Evelyn stared at him. "What?" "You've been here 2 weeks and you've changed everything. The children laugh now. They eat. They sleep through the night without nightmares. Thomas asked me yesterday what my favorite color was. Do you know the last time one of them voluntarily spoke to me about anything?" His voice was raw now, unguarded. "The house feels different, lighter, and He looked away. "I don't want you to leave. You literally just threw me out of a ballroom. I panicked. You panicked. I'm not proud of it." He met her eyes again. "But yes, I saw everyone staring, heard the whispers starting, and I panicked. I thought about the scandal, about what it would mean for the children's future, about how society would treat them if they were associated with—" He stopped. "With a fallen woman?" Evelyn finished bitterly. "Is that what you were going to say?" "With someone who'd been hurt by a bastard like Armand Vale," he corrected sharply. "Someone who deserved better than she got. Someone who—" He seemed to be struggling with the words. "Someone I care about losing." Evelyn's breath caught. "Your Grace." "Rowan," he interrupted. "If we're going to have this conversation, you should at least call me by my name." "Rowan," she repeated, testing it. The intimacy of it felt dangerous, like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying stay, please. The children need you. He swallowed hard. "I need you. You don't even know me. I know you're brave enough to stand up to me when everyone else in this house walks on eggshells. I know you care more about 3 children who aren't yours than most people care about anything in their entire lives. I know you make me want to be better than I am." He took a step closer. "And I know that when that bastard Vale tried to humiliate you in front of everyone, all I wanted to do was break his jaw. That would have caused significantly more scandal. Probably. I don't care." Another step. "Stay. Please. We'll figure out the rest." Evelyn wanted to. The wanting was a physical ache in her chest, sharp and terrifying. But wanting things had gotten her hurt before, had left her broken and poor and sleeping on floors. "I can't," she said. "Not if it means the children suffer for it. You heard the whispers. You saw how people looked at me. At them, by association. If I stay, it'll get worse. They'll become the Duke's wards with the scandalous governess. Every door will close to them." "Then let them close." "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" His voice was fierce now, raw and honest in a way she'd never heard from him. "I've spent 6 months trying to do the right thing for those children, trying to protect them from gossip and pity and cruelty by keeping them hidden away. And all I've done is make them prisoners. You showed me how wrong that was, how much damage I was doing by trying to keep them safe from everything." He reached out, hesitated like he wasn't sure he had the right, then took her hand. "Let them talk. Let them judge. I'm done hiding. I'm done being ashamed of a tragedy that wasn't anyone's fault. I need you to stay." The door burst open before Evelyn could answer. Beatrice stood there with Clara and Thomas behind her, all 3 of them wide-eyed and breathing hard like they'd run the whole way. Their faces were flushed. Clara had chocolate on her chin. "You need her to stay?" Beatrice demanded, looking directly at her uncle. "You actually said that? Out loud?" Rowan dropped Evelyn's hand like it had burned him. This is a private conversation." "We heard everything," Clara announced cheerfully, around a mouthful of what looked like lemon cake. "Lady Ashford said we could listen through the door if we were quiet. We were very quiet." "Lady Ashford is a menace," Rowan muttered. "So you want Miss Laurent to stay?" Thomas asked. His voice was small, but there was hope in it, fragile and desperate. "Even after what that horrible man said? Even though people were whispering?" Rowan looked at the three of them, then at Evelyn, then back at the children who were watching him with identical expressions of desperate hope. Yes, he said finally, if she'll have us. Us? Beatrice's eyebrows went up so far they nearly disappeared into her hair. You mean like a family, all of us together? That's not what I... Rowan looked panicked again, like he'd said too much and was trying to figure out how to take it back. He meant he needs help, Evelyn interrupted gently, saving him from whatever he was about to fumble into. Taking care of you. Because you're a lot of work. We are not, Clara protested through her mouthful of cake, spraying crumbs. You threw porridge at me yesterday. That was an accident. You said take this right before you threw it. Clara giggled, trying to look innocent and failing completely. Thomas smiled, small and shy. Even Beatrice's mouth twitched towards something that wasn't quite a smile but was close. So you'll stay? Beatrice asked Evelyn, and there was something raw in her voice, something that said she'd been abandoned too many times to fully believe in promises anymore. Even though everyone thinks you're scandalous now, even though we're the reason you got humiliated? You're not the reason for anything, Evelyn said firmly. That was Armand being cruel because he's a small, petty man who enjoys hurting people. None of that has anything to do with you. But will you stay? Beatrice pressed. Or are you going to leave like everyone else? I don't know, Evelyn said honestly, because lying to children never worked. It's complicated. Life is complicated, Beatrice said, sounding 40 years old instead of 12. But running away doesn't make it less complicated. It just makes you alone. You told me that. Remember? That first night when I wanted to run away because you'd arrived, and I thought you'd be like all the others. Evelyn did remember. Beatrice standing in that destroyed nursery with a wooden sword, building walls so high nothing could get through. You said hiding won't make it better, Beatrice continued, stepping closer. You said we had to face things, be brave. So now you have to be brave too. You have to practice what you preach. Out of the mouths of children. Evelyn looked at Rowan, at the hope and fear warring in his expression, like he was braced for her to walk away. Then at the three children who'd somehow become hers without her meaning for it to happen, without her planning for it, without her having any right to them at all. They were watching her like she held their entire world in her hands. Maybe she did. All right, she said. I'll stay. Clara shrieked, an actual shriek of pure joy, and launched herself at Evelyn, nearly knocking her over. Her small arms wrapped around Evelyn's waist in a grip that was surprisingly strong. Thomas followed more carefully, hugging her from the other side. Beatrice hung back for a moment, trying to maintain her dignity, then gave up and joined the pile of children clinging to Evelyn like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. Rowan watched them with an expression Evelyn couldn't quite read. Something soft. Something that looked almost like grief but sweeter, like he was mourning something and celebrating something at the same time. We should go back to the ball, he said finally, his voice rough. Face them, all of us together. Evelyn looked up from the tangle of children. You want to go back? After everything? I want them to see that we're not ashamed, that we're... He looked at the children, then at her, then seemed to make some kind of decision. That we're a family, however unconventional, however scandalous they find it. People will talk, Evelyn warned. They'll say terrible things. Let them. Rowan's jaw was set. I'm done caring what they think. They walked back into the ballroom together, Rowan with Beatrice on one arm and Thomas on the other, Evelyn holding Clara's hand, all of them still slightly damp from the rain, and definitely rumpled and probably breaking 17 rules of etiquette. The room went quiet the instant they appeared. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Every eye turned toward them. But this time Rowan didn't flinch. He walked straight across the floor to where Lord Ashford was holding court near the massive fireplace, and said clearly enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear, Thank you for your hospitality tonight. I apologize for the disruption earlier. Miss Laurent is an invaluable member of my household, and I spoke rashly in a moment of poor judgment. I hope you'll forgive the scene we caused. Lord Ashford looked absolutely delighted, like this was the best entertainment he'd had in years. Nothing to forgive, my boy. These things happen. Emotions run high at these events, and your Miss Laurent is quite something, I've heard nothing but good reports about her work with the children. My wife can't stop singing her praises. Margaret's fiancé was being an absolute bore about the whole thing anyway. I'm glad you've sorted it out." "As am I." Rowan turned to Eveline. His eyes were serious, intent, like he was about to do something reckless and wanted her to know it was deliberate. "Would you care to dance?" She stared at him. "What?" "You heard me. Would you like to dance?" "I'm a governess. You're a duke. We can't. That's not. People will." "We absolutely can." He held out his hand, steady and sure. "Unless you're afraid of causing more scandal." Eveline looked at his outstretched hand, at the children watching her with bated breath, at the room full of nobility waiting to see what she'd do, ready to judge her no matter what choice she made. She took his hand. The musicians, bless them, started playing without needing to be asked. Someone must have given them a signal. Rowan led her onto the floor and pulled her into a waltz position. His hand settled at her waist, warm through the damp fabric of her dress, hers on his shoulder. They were standing too close for propriety. Everyone was staring again. The whispers were starting. Eveline didn't care. "I don't actually know how to waltz properly," she admitted as they started moving. "I know the basic steps, but I've never... I'm going to step on your feet." "You're doing fine." "I can feel myself stepping on your feet." "I'll survive." They turned, awkward and uncertain, while the entire ballroom watched. Eveline was acutely aware of every eye on them, every whispered comment, every judgment being passed. But Rowan kept moving, kept guiding her through the steps, and gradually, very gradually, she started to relax into it. And then, slowly, other couples joined them on the floor. Lord and Lady Ashford first, Lady Ashford shooting Eveline a triumphant wink as they swept past. Then others, one by one, deciding that if the Duke of Blackthorn was willing to break convention, they could afford to follow his lead. By the second verse, the floor was half full. By the third, people had mostly stopped staring. Rowan pulled her slightly closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Thank you for staying, for not giving up on us when you had every reason to." "I should be thanking you," Eveline said, "for defending me, for doing what I should have done from the start." His eyes were serious, intense in a way that made her breath catch. "I've been a coward about everything, about the children, about my responsibilities, about this. But you made me see what I was doing wrong. You made me want to be better. You're already better than you think you are." "I'm really not." A slight smile. "But maybe I can be, with help." The dance ended. They stepped apart, and the room, that same room that had been full of judgment and whispers and cruelty 20 minutes ago, actually applauded. Eveline looked around in shock. Are they actually... "They're fickle," Rowan said quietly. "Society always is. But they respect boldness. And we just gave them the most entertaining evening they've had in months. They'll dine out on this story for weeks." He offered her his arm. "Shall we collect the children and go home?" Home. The words settled into Eveline's chest like warmth spreading through cold limbs. "Yes," she said. "Let's go home." They found the children in the dining room, still being plied with cake and tea by Lady Ashford, who looked enormously pleased with herself. "You survived," Beatrice observed as they approached. "We did," Eveline confirmed. "Uncle Rowan danced with you, in front of everyone, in front of people who will definitely gossip about it." "He did? That's very scandalous." "Apparently we're past caring about scandal," Rowan said. Beatrice grinned, wide and genuine and startlingly young. "Good. Being boring was terrible anyway." The carriage ride home was nothing like the tense, silent journey there. Clara fell asleep against Eveline's shoulder before they'd even left the estate grounds, sticky with sugar and exhausted from excitement. Thomas chattered about the music and the food, and how Lady Ashford had told him he had excellent manners and would make a fine gentleman someday. Beatrice sat next to her uncle and, very carefully, very deliberately, leaned against his arm. Rowan froze for a moment. Then slowly, like he was afraid of breaking something precious, he put his arm around her shoulders. She didn't pull away. Eveline watched them across the carriage in the dim light from the outside lamps and felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back, not wanting to disturb the moment. When they finally arrived at Blackthorn Hall, it was past midnight. The house was dark except for a single lamp burning in the entrance hall and another in what looked like the housekeeper's office. Mrs. Helmsley appeared from the shadows almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. Her expression was carefully neutral. "I heard about the ball," she said without preamble. "I'm sure you did," Rowan replied evenly. "Miss Laurent will be staying permanently, with an increase in wages and full authority over the children's education and daily care. Is that understood?" Mrs. Helmsley's mouth pressed into a thin line, her hands clasped in front of her. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she nodded. "Yes, Your Grace." "Excellent. Now, if you'll excuse us, it's been a very long evening, and we're all exhausted." He herded the children toward the stairs, Thomas yawning, Beatrice helping support a still sleeping Clara, leaving Eveline alone in the entrance hall with the housekeeper. "You won," Mrs. Helmsley said quietly. Not accusatory, just stating a fact. "This wasn't about winning, wasn't it?" The older woman studied her. "You came here with nothing, no references, no prospects. You challenged every rule in this house. You made yourself indispensable to the children and apparently to His Grace as well. If that's not winning, Miss Laurent, I don't know what is." "I came here desperate," Eveline corrected. "I stayed because those children needed someone and no one else was willing to do it. The rest just happened." Mrs. Helmsley was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, something in her expression shifted. Softened, just fractionally. "You're good for them," she said grudgingly. "I won't deny that. The house is different since you arrived. Louder, messier. There's jam on the wallpaper in the breakfast room, and someone, I suspect Miss Clara, has been teaching the kitchen cat to steal bacon." A pause. "But the children are better, happier, and His Grace is—" She trailed off. "Is what?" Eveline prompted. "Present. For the first time since his brother died, he's actually here, actually paying attention." Mrs. Helmsley's voice was softer now. "So perhaps you did win after all. Or perhaps we all did." It was possibly the closest thing to an apology Eveline would ever get from this woman. "Thank you," she said. Mrs. Helmsley nodded once, sharp and formal, then disappeared back into the shadows from which she'd emerged. Eveline climbed the stairs slowly, exhaustion settling into her bones. She could hear Rowan's voice from the children's room saying goodnight, Beatrice arguing that she wasn't tired even though her words were slurred with sleep. Thomas asking if tomorrow they could have breakfast together again, all of them at the table. She reached her small room, changed into her nightgown, and sat on the edge of her bed. 2 weeks ago, she'd arrived here with nothing, with no one, with no hope beyond surviving one more day without collapsing completely. Now she had 3 children who trusted her enough to show her their wounds. A duke who'd defended her in front of society and danced with her despite the scandal. A house that felt less like a prison and more like something that might eventually become a home. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and probably going to get significantly worse before it got better. There would be more whispers, more judgment, more moments when she questioned whether staying was the right choice, but it was hers. These people, this strange cobbled-together family that made no sense on paper, they were hers, and she was theirs. And that, finally, was enough. 3 weeks passed like water flowing around rocks, not smoothly, not easily, but with a kind of inevitable forward motion that couldn't be stopped. The morning after the ball, Eveline woke to Clara crawling into her bed before dawn, burrowing under the covers like a small animal seeking warmth. "Bad dream?" Eveline asked, still half asleep. "No? Good dream. About you staying. I wanted to make sure it was real." Eveline pulled her close. "It's real. Promise?" "Promise." Clara fell back asleep within minutes, snoring softly against Eveline's shoulder. Eveline lay awake watching the gray light creep across the ceiling and tried not to think about how quickly she'd fallen in love with these children. How much it would destroy her if something went wrong. But nothing went wrong. Or rather, things went wrong constantly, because children were children and life was messy, but nothing catastrophic happened. No one sent her away. No one decided the scandal was too much. The house settled into something that almost resembled normal. Beatrice stopped testing boundaries quite so viciously, though she still questioned everything with the tenacity of a lawyer. Thomas came out of his shell inch by painful inch, asking questions during lessons, laughing at jokes, even arguing with his sisters when they annoyed him. Clara remained chaotic and sticky and full of questions that had no good answers, but she also started sleeping through the night without nightmares. And Rowan. Rowan was the complication Evelyn hadn't anticipated. He started joining them for breakfast every morning instead of taking it alone in his study. He asked the children about their lessons. He walked with them in the gardens after dinner when the weather cooperated. He was awkward about it, stiff and formal and clearly out of practice, but he was trying, and he kept looking at Evelyn like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. She caught him watching her during meals, in the library when she was reading to the children, in the hallway when she was herding them upstairs for bed. His expression was always the same, intent, serious, like he was trying to figure something out and couldn't quite get there. It made her nervous. It made her hope. She tried not to think about it too much. Then, 3 weeks after the ball, a letter arrived. Mrs. Helmsley brought it to the breakfast table personally, which was unusual enough that everyone stopped eating to stare. "A letter for you, Your Grace," she said, placing it beside Rowan's plate. "From London. It appears urgent." Rowan picked it up, broke the seal, and read in silence while the children fidgeted and Evelyn pretended to focus on her tea. His expression went dark. "What is it?" Beatrice asked, never one to let silence stand when she could fill it with questions. "Nothing that concerns you," Rowan said, but his voice was tight. "Is it bad news?" Thomas asked quietly. "It's—" Rowan stopped, set the letter down carefully, like it might explode. "It's complicated." Everything is always complicated," Clara announced. "That's what Miss Laurent says when she doesn't want to explain something." Despite the tension, Evelyn almost smiled. Rowan looked at her across the table. "May I speak with you? Privately?" Her stomach dropped. "Of course." They left the children with Mrs. Helmsley, who looked disapproving but didn't argue, and went to his study. The room was exactly what she'd expected: dark wood, heavy furniture, shelves crammed with books and ledgers, and the accumulated debris of running an estate. It smelled like leather and ink and something sharp that might have been whiskey. Rowan closed the door and leaned against his desk, not quite sitting, not quite standing. He looked exhausted. "What's wrong?" Evelyn asked. "The letters from my solicitor. Apparently word of the ball has reached certain interested parties in London, specifically the children's maternal grandmother." Evelyn's chest tightened. "I didn't know they had a grandmother." "They don't, not in any meaningful sense." Rowan's jaw was tight. "Lady Pemberton, the woman who made the comment about their mother at the ball, is my late sister-in-law's mother. She disowned her daughter when she married my brother, said he was beneath her station, refused to attend the wedding, didn't speak to her for 12 years. And now she wants the children? Now she wants to contest my guardianship, claims I'm unfit, that the scandal at the ball, specifically my relationship with you, proves I'm not providing a suitable environment for young children." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "The solicitor says she has a case, especially given that I'm unmarried and you're—" "Scandalous," Evelyn finished quietly. "That's not what I was going to say." "But it's what she'll say, what everyone will say." Evelyn pressed her hands together to keep them from shaking. "This is my fault. If Armand hadn't—" "This has nothing to do with you." Rowan's voice was hard. "This is about a bitter old woman who ignored her daughter in life and now wants to claim her grandchildren in death. She doesn't care about them. She cares about control, about reputation, about winning." "But she's right, isn't she? About the scandal, about me being inappropriate?" "She's not right about anything." "Rowan, no." He pushed off the desk and crossed to her in 2 strides. "Listen to me. You are the best thing that's happened to those children since their parents died. You've given them stability, safety, love, things I couldn't give them because I didn't know how, things their grandmother never gave their mother. If she takes them away—" His voice cracked slightly. "I can't let that happen." "What are you going to do?" "Fight, obviously. The solicitor says I need to prove I can provide a stable, appropriate home, that the children are thriving, that—" He stopped. "That what?" "That I'm not an unmarried duke living in sin with his children's governess." The words hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn's heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear herself think. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just... He ran a hand through his hair. The solicitor says marriage would strengthen my case considerably. Show stability, respectability, all the things Lady Pemberton is claiming I lack. Marriage? Evelyn's voice came out strangled. To whom? Rowan looked at her like she was being deliberately dense. To you, obviously. The room tilted. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You're suggesting a marriage of convenience to win a legal battle? I'm suggesting a marriage that would benefit both of us. You'd have security, a title, protection from scandal, and I'd have a wife, which apparently matters to judges who think unmarried men can't raise children properly. That's insane. Is it? He stepped closer. We already live together. We already spend every day together. The children already see you as more family than employee. Why not make it official? Because marriage isn't a legal strategy. It's supposed to be about... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the word love when he was looking at her like this was a business transaction. About what? He asked quietly. Romance? Passion? I tried that once. It ended badly. I'm not interested in grand gestures and false promises. I'm interested in partnership, stability, someone I can trust with my life and the lives of those children. You barely know me. I know you better than I've known anyone in years. And you know me. You've seen me at my worst and you haven't run. That counts for something. It did count for something. It counted for a lot, but it wasn't enough. I can't, Evelyn said. I'm sorry. I can't marry you just to win a court case. His expression shuddered. I see. Do you? Because I don't think you understand what you're asking. I'm asking you to help me save those children from a woman who will destroy them. You're asking me to marry you for the wrong reasons. Her voice rose. You're asking me to settle for a convenient arrangement when I've already spent my entire life settling for less than I deserved. And I won't do that again. Silence. Rowan stared at her, then, very quietly, what if they weren't the wrong reasons? What? What if I'm asking for the wrong reasons but wanting it for the right ones? Evelyn's breath caught. Rowan, I'm not good at this, he said, at talking about feelings or making pretty speeches, but I need you to know that this isn't just about the legal case. It's about... He stopped, tried again. When I watch you with the children, when I see you turn that disaster of a nursery into something warm and safe, when you argue with me at dinner and make me see things differently, I don't want it to end. I don't want you to be just the governess I hired. I want you to be... He seemed to be struggling with the words. I want you to stay, permanently, as my wife, as their mother, as what? As mine, he finished quietly. If you'll have me. The world went very still. You're serious, Evelyn whispered. Completely. You actually want to marry me. Not just for the case, for us. Yes. She stared at him, this proud, difficult, damaged man who'd let her into his life despite every instinct telling him not to, who'd defended her in front of society, who danced with her when it would have been easier to walk away. I need time to think, she said. His face fell, but he nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. He left her standing in his study, surrounded by books and silence and the enormous weight of the decision in front of her. Evelyn found the children in the library. They looked up when she entered, their expressions carefully neutral, in a way that meant they'd definitely been eavesdropping. We heard shouting, Beatrice said without preamble. Is Uncle Rowan sending you away? No, nothing like that. Then what's wrong? Thomas asked. You look upset. Evelyn sat down in the chair by the window. The children clustered around her immediately, Clara in her lap, Thomas at her feet, Beatrice perched on the arm of the chair. Your grandmother wants to take you away, she said. No point hiding it. They'd find out anyway. Beatrice went rigid. Our mother's mother? The one who hated her? Yes. She can't do that, Thomas said, his voice rising in panic. Can she? We don't even know her. Oh, she's claiming your uncle isn't a suitable guardian. That's stupid, Clara said. Uncle Rowan is fine. He's getting better. He asked me about my dolls yesterday. I know, but the law is complicated, and she has money and influence, and you're scandalous, Beatrice finished flatly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You staying here makes Uncle Rowan look bad. Beatrice. It's true, though. The girl's voice was hard. If you leave, the case goes away. We stay here. Everything goes back to normal. Normal was terrible, Thomas protested. Before Miss Laurent came, we were miserable. I know that, but nothing. Clara's small hands grabbed Evelyn's face, forcing her to look down. You can't leave. You promised. You said you'd stay. I'm not leaving, Evelyn said firmly. I'm trying to figure out how to fix this. Then marry him, Beatrice said. Evelyn's head snapped up. What? Marry Uncle Rowan. That's what he asked you, isn't it? In the study? We heard some of it before Mrs. Helmsley made us leave. It's not that simple. Why not? Beatrice challenged. You like him. He likes you. We like both of you. Marriage solves the legal problem. What's complicated about it? Marriage is supposed to be about more than solving problems. Like what? Love? Beatrice's voice was sharp, bitter. Our parents loved each other, and they're still dead. Love doesn't protect you from anything. Beatrice, but partnership does. Loyalty does. You and Uncle Rowan work well together. You make each other better. Isn't that enough? From the mouths of children, again. Evelyn looked at the three of them, these impossible, brilliant, wounded children who'd somehow become the center of her entire world. What if it goes wrong? She asked quietly. What if we marry and then regret it? What if it goes right? Thomas interrupted. His voice was soft but steady. What if you marry him and we become a real family? Wouldn't that be worth the risk? Would it? Evelyn had spent her entire life playing it safe, taking the cautious path, settling for less because less was safer than risking more. And where had it gotten her? Broken. Alone. Sleeping on floors. Until she'd taken the biggest risk of her life and walked into Blackthorn Hall with nothing to lose. I need to talk to your uncle, she said. She found Rowan in his garden, standing in the cold drizzle like he didn't notice it was raining. He turned when he heard her approach. Evelyn, I'll marry you, she said before she could lose her nerve. But I have conditions. His eyes went wide. Conditions? Yes. First, this can't just be a convenient arrangement. If we do this, we do it properly. We're partners. Equals. I won't be some decoration you trot out when you need to look respectable. I would never... Second, she continued, talking over him, the children come first. Always. Whatever happens between us, they stay protected. They stay safe. They stay together. Obviously. And third, she took a breath. Third, you have to promise me that if this doesn't work, if we realize we've made a terrible mistake, we figure it out together instead of running away. No disappearing to London for weeks. No avoiding each other in our own house. We face things, deal with them, like adults. Is that all? There was something that might have been amusement in his voice. No, one more thing. I'm listening. You have to actually court me, properly, because I refuse to marry someone who's never even told me he finds me remotely attractive. He blinked. Then, slowly, he smiled. Really smiled. Not the polite thing he did in public, but something genuine and warm and slightly devastating. I can manage that, he said. Can you? Because you're not exactly known for romantic gestures. Then I'll learn. He stepped closer, took her hand carefully, like she might bolt. Evelyn Laurent, you are the most infuriating, brilliant, stubborn woman I've ever met. You argue with me constantly. You make me question everything I thought I knew. You've turned my house upside down and made me care about things I'd successfully avoided caring about for years. He paused. And you're beautiful. Especially when you're angry at me. I'm frequently angry at you. I know. I'm counting on it keeping me honest. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. Is that courting enough for now, or do I need to compose poetry? Please don't compose poetry. You'd be terrible at it. Probably. He was still smiling. So, is that a yes? It's a conditional yes, subject to you not being insufferable about it. I'm always insufferable. I know. I'm accepting it as part of the package. He laughed. actually laughed. The sound surprised out of him, and pulled her into a kiss that was clumsy and uncertain and perfect because it was real. Because it was them. When they finally pulled apart, the children were watching from the library window, all three of them grinning like they'd orchestrated the entire thing, which, knowing Beatrice, they probably had. The wedding happened fast because the legal case was moving fast, and because neither of them saw the point in dragging it out. 2 weeks of frantic preparation. Mrs. Helmsley coordinating with a dressmaker. Rowan handling the legal paperwork. The children alternatively excited and terrified that something would go wrong. Lady Pemberton's solicitor filed formal custody papers 3 days before the wedding, claiming the rushed marriage proved Rowan's unfitness. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks after the ceremony. "She's going to fight this to the bitter end," Rowan said the night before the wedding, staring at the legal documents like he could set them on fire through sheer will. "Let her fight," Evelyn said. She was in his study helping him organize paperwork, both of them pretending this was normal. "We'll win. You don't know that. I know we're not giving up. I know those children love us. And I know Lady Pemberton is a bitter, cruel woman who doesn't deserve them. That has to count for something. The law doesn't care about deserve. Then we'll make it care." He looked at her, something soft in his expression. "How are you this brave?" "I'm not brave. I'm terrified. But I've learned that being terrified and doing the thing anyway is sometimes the only option." "Evelyn, don't," she interrupted gently. "Don't say something that will make me cry the night before my wedding. I have standards." He smiled despite everything. "Fair enough." They worked in silence for a while longer, organizing evidence of the children's progress. School assignments, doctors' reports showing improved health, testimonials from servants about the change in the household. It wasn't much, but it was something. The wedding itself was small, just the children, Mrs. Helmsley, Lord and Lady Ashford, and the vicar who looked vaguely scandalized by the whole thing, but performed the ceremony anyway because Rowan paid him extremely well. Evelyn wore a dress Lady Ashford had insisted on providing, pale blue silk that actually fit properly for once. The children stood beside her, Clara holding the small bouquet of winter roses Rowan had somehow procured despite the season. Rowan wore black, formal, and severe, and impossibly handsome in a way that made Evelyn's breath catch. The vows were traditional, simple, but when Rowan said, "I do," his eyes were on hers, and there was something in them that looked like a promise that went deeper than the words. When it was her turn, Evelyn didn't hesitate. "I do." The vicar pronounced them married. Rowan kissed her, properly this time. Not like the uncertain thing in the garden, but with confidence and possession, and something that made her forget they had an audience. Clara giggled. Thomas covered his eyes. Beatrice made a gagging sound, but she was smiling. And just like that, Eveline Laurent became Evelyn Blackthorne. Duchess. Wife. Mother to 3 children who weren't hers by blood, but were absolutely hers by choice. The celebration was modest. Dinner at Blackthorne Hall with too much wine, and the children allowed to stay up late. Clara fell asleep at the table. Thomas asked 17 questions about what being a duchess meant. Beatrice pulled Evelyn aside after dinner. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for staying, for fighting for us. You don't have to thank me." "I do, though, because you didn't have to do any of this. You could have walked away, found another position, started over somewhere else, but you stayed. Even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to leave." "Where else would I go?" Evelyn asked. "You're my family now." Beatrice's eyes went bright. She hugged Evelyn hard enough to hurt, then ran off before either of them could cry. Evelyn and Rowan spent their wedding night in separate rooms because neither of them knew how to navigate this new reality, and pretending everything was normal felt safer than acknowledging how much had changed. But the next morning, Rowan knocked on her door before breakfast. "May I come in?" "It's your house." "It's our house." He stepped inside looking uncomfortable. Before the hearing today, I wanted to make sure "I'm fine," Evelyn interrupted. "Nervous, terrified, but fine. We're going to win this. You don't know that. I know we're not losing those children without a fight." His jaw was set, determined. "Whatever happens in that courtroom, whatever Lady Pemberton's solicitor says, we face it together. Like you made me promise. Together," Evelyn agreed. The courtroom was smaller than she'd expected. Wood paneling, high windows, a judge who looked 1,000 years old and profoundly unimpressed with everyone. Lady Pemberton sat on one side with her solicitor, a thin, sharp-faced man who looked like he enjoyed causing pain. She was exactly what Evelyn had imagined: elegant, cold, with eyes like ice chips, and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. Rowan and Evelyn sat on the other side with their own solicitor, a younger man, nervous but competent. The children weren't allowed in the courtroom, which was probably for the best. The hearing began. Lady Pemberton's solicitor went first, painting a picture of Rowan as a neglectful guardian who'd abandoned the children to servants, allowed them to run wild, and then hastily married his governess to hide his unsuitability. The children were found destroying property, Your Honor, violent and uncontrollable. The Duke left them for weeks at a time, and when Miss Laurent, now the Duchess, arrived, she brought scandal with her, a broken engagement, questions about her character. The Duke married her in what can only be described as panic when my client filed for custody. It was brutal, efficient, and unfortunately not entirely inaccurate. Then their solicitor stood. He presented the evidence they'd gathered: the children's improved health, their educational progress, testimonials from servants about the change in the household, a letter from Lord Ashford praising Evelyn's influence. The children were grieving, Your Honor, acting out because they'd lost their parents and didn't know how to process that loss. The Duchess, then Miss Laurent, provided structure, stability, and care. Under her guidance and the Duke's renewed attention, they've thrived. To remove them now would be cruel and counterproductive. Lady Pemberton's solicitor objected to almost everything. The judge looked bored. Then Lady Pemberton herself was called to testify. She took the stand with perfect posture and cold confidence. "Tell us about your relationship with your daughter," the solicitor prompted. "We were estranged. I disapproved of her marriage." "And now you want custody of her children?" "I want to provide them with the stability and proper upbringing they deserve, something the current arrangement clearly cannot offer." "What makes you believe you can provide better care?" "I have means, resources, a proper household without scandal or irregularity. I can give them the life my daughter should have had. It was calculated, perfect, exactly what a judge would want to hear." Then their solicitor stood for cross-examination. "Lady Pemberton, when did you last see your grandchildren?" She hesitated. "At my daughter's funeral." "Before that?" "I hadn't seen them. As I said, we were estranged." "So you've had no relationship with these children whatsoever?" "Not yet, but I intend to." "You disowned your daughter for marrying the man she loved. You refused to attend her wedding. You never met her children while she was alive. And now that she's dead, you want to take those children from the only home they've known?" The solicitor's voice was sharp now, cutting. "This isn't about their welfare. This is about control. I object to that characterization. Did you know your daughter was afraid of you, that she told friends she'd rather die than let you near her children?" Lady Pemberton's face went white. "That's a lie. We have letters, written to a friend, describing her fear of you, her relief at being free of your influence." He produced documents. "Would you like me to read them aloud?" The judge intervened. "That won't be necessary, but I'll review the letters." The hearing continued for another hour. Witnesses, arguments, technical details about guardianship law. Finally, the judge called a recess to review everything. Evelyn and Rowan waited in a small antechamber, not talking, just sitting together while the world decided their fate. "Whatever happens," Rowan started. "We'll handle it," Evelyn finished. "Together." He took her hand, squeezed it. They waited. The judge called them back after what felt like years, but was probably only 30 minutes. "I've reviewed the evidence," he said, his voice dry and formal. "This is an unusual case. Lady Pemberton's concerns about propriety are not without merit. The circumstances of the Duke's marriage are irregular." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "However," the judge continued, "the children's welfare is paramount, and the evidence clearly shows they are thriving under the current arrangement. The educational reports are excellent, the health assessments show marked improvement, and the testimonials, including one from the children's former physician describing them as dangerously withdrawn before Miss Laurent's arrival, are compelling." He looked at Lady Pemberton. "You had no relationship with these children during their mother's lifetime. You made no effort to know them, support them, or maintain any connection. Your sudden interest now appears motivated by factors other than their best interests. Lady Pemberton's face was stone. Custody will remain with the Duke of Blackthorn and his wife. The children will stay in their current home. This court sees no reason to disrupt an arrangement that is clearly working. He banged his gavel. Case dismissed. Evelyn couldn't breathe, couldn't move. They'd won. Actually won. Rowan was on his feet, shaking their solicitor's hand, thanking the judge. Evelyn just sat there trying to process what had happened. Lady Pemberton swept out of the courtroom without a word, her solicitor scrambling to follow. In the hallway outside, the children were waiting with Mrs. Helmsley. The moment they saw Evelyn and Rowan, they knew. "We won?" Beatrice asked. "We won," Rowan confirmed. Clara shrieked and launched herself at both of them. Thomas was crying, trying to hide it and failing. Even Beatrice's eyes were wet. "You're staying?" Thomas asked through tears. "Both of you? Forever?" "Forever," Evelyn promised, kneeling down to pull all three of them into her arms. "You're stuck with us." "Good," Beatrice said fiercely. "Because we're keeping you." The ride back to Blackthorn Hall was loud and chaotic and perfect. The children talked over each other, asking questions, making plans, arguing about who got to tell Cook the news first. Rowan sat beside Evelyn, his hand finding hers in the space between them. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. They'd done it. Against the odds, against society, against a bitter woman with money and influence and the law on her side. They'd fought, and they'd won. That night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Evelyn found Rowan in the library. He was standing by the window, looking out at the dark gardens. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Too much in my head." He turned to look at her. "We actually did it. Did you doubt we would?" "Constantly. Every minute of every day." He crossed to her, took her hands. "Thank you. For fighting, for staying, for being braver than I could ever be." "I wasn't brave. I was terrified." "Same thing, apparently." He smiled slightly. "What happens now?" "Now?" Evelyn considered. "Now we figure out how to be married. How to raise 3 children who are definitely going to test every boundary we set. How to live in this house without killing each other." "Sounds complicated." "Everything about us is complicated." "Good thing we're both too stubborn to quit." "Exceptionally good thing." She looked up at him, this difficult, damaged, wonderful man who'd given her a home when she had nothing. "I love you." I should probably say that, since we're married now and it seems relevant. His eyes went wide. "You... what?" "I love you. Not because you're a duke, not because you rescued me, but because you let me rescue you right back. Because you're a better man than you think you are. Because you're trying so hard to be the father those children deserve even though you have no idea what you're doing." She smiled. "And because you make me want to stay even when leaving would be easier." "I love you too," he said, the words rough and unpracticed but real. "I'm terrible at showing it. I'll probably mess it up constantly, but I do. Love you. More than I thought I was capable of." He kissed her then, and it wasn't clumsy or uncertain anymore. It was sure. It was right. It was theirs. Upstairs, in their rooms, 3 children slept peacefully for the first time in months. The house that had been a prison became a home. The family that shouldn't have worked somehow did. And Evelyn, who'd arrived with nothing, who'd been mocked and dismissed and told she'd never last, stood in the library of Blackthorn Hall as a duchess, a wife, a mother, and thought about all the people who'd said she wasn't worth the trouble. They'd been wrong. She was worth everything. And she'd proven it.